Stop, relax, get busy with the fan. Like I first time I heard that, like here's the thing, right? I know I'm coming in right out of the gate. First time I heard it, I thought cringe. Now I hear it and I think this is cool as fuck. Like
yeah.
like
it is one of those things that maybe, I guess at the time it was a little bit cringy, but
now it goes off.
It's like, aged very well for me. Like that, yeah. I love that part of the song. I love that song in general. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cranked and Ranked. That's going to be the beginning of the episode. Just you saying, stop, relax. Because I was going to do something stupid like, attention, all planets of the Solar Federation.
Well, we've got 2 more episodes to do, so you can easily.
Shit. I'll do that next time.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll save that for the finale. Yes, Cranked and Ranked is this show you're either listening to on your podcast platform of choice, or you're watching it on YouTube. And we rank rock and metal and other kinds of music discographies. And this is I think I'm more excited about this series of episodes than I have been about anything we've done. Wow. Just because I like talking about this band. And yes, so as you can see by the name of this is Rush Part 1, because this will be a massive 3-part discography ranking of Rush. We're going to rank
3-parter, baby,
all of their full-length studio albums, which really that's the majority of what they did. I think they have that one covers EP, and everything else is singles and whatnot, like, so, and live albums obviously. But we could do a fucking video ranking the live albums, because I think there's got to be 6, 7, 5. There's a lot. There's quite
a few. Yeah,
and then but then you have ones that came out like on DVD and whatnot. But yes, Rush is our undertaking, and Rush is one of my favorite bands of all time. But I have to say that I've learned over the years that I'm not really that big of a Rush fan, because you know how there are fans of Star Trek, and then there are fans of Star Trek who learn Klingon.
Yeah, yeah, straight up.
I'm the former when it comes to Rush. Like, I love every album they ever put out. I own most of everything I can get my hands on, VHS, vinyl, whatever. I even forked over just recently $300 for the Moving Pictures big, massive box set.
Wow.
So I'm a fan, but there are those fans out there that know like every nickname that each member has for each other, and nicknames they have for particular songs. And I don't know
what Alex had for breakfast on February the 17th.
It might as well
1981.
And there's a part of me that I do wish that I could be in the cool club like that, but there's just too much shit that has my attention that isn't just Rush. So so while Rush is one of my favorite bands, you could say that I'm not the greatest fan in the world, because I don't know all of these things. I think we did a video which was, how well do you know your favorite bands? And you asked me some question like, what concentration camp were Geddy Lee's parents in, or something. And I'm like, why would I know that?
Well, the thing is, you'd conveyed that you knew so much about the bands that you'd picked. I thought I don't want to patronize you by saying which Rush album came out in 1981, or something like that.
That would have been easier. But I mean, yeah. So I guess when it comes down to it, like when I have favorite bands, it's really mostly musically speaking. I think Metallica is probably one of the only bands where I think I know a shitload about them personally as well. But once again, not as much as some. So
That's the thing. For me, I have like 5 bands I know a shitload about, and
yeah,
then the rest I know the odd fun fact here or there. But
yeah,
like my top 5 being like Metallica, Megadeth, Alice in Chains, Faith No More, and Ugly Kid Joe.
yeah.
Like I know their stories inside and out. But
Hmm.
once you look at a band like fucking Led Zeppelin, which I love,
Yeah,
but I still hear things from time to time where I'm like, I did not know that,
yeah, yeah. And I think Rush is never gonna. That's never gonna end with me for Rush, because I think every book that I've read about Rush always ends up telling me something that I didn't already know. But so first off, I just want to point out that I am drinking coffee out of my Cranked and Ranked coffee mug that you can
I am
get.
also drinking out of.
And it says peanut butter platypus
Yeah,
on one side, and it has our images on the other side, and you
our
can pick
mug's
that
on a
up.
mug.
You can pick that up if you're watching this on YouTube. Just scroll down, and but if there's links and shit. But in the podcast world, head over to oldhead.myspreadshop.com. I think that's what it is. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's as long as I'm going to do that commercial. But yeah, if you want to support us, that is a way to do it. Because we provide all this top quality entertainment for free.
Hell yeah.
But so as we usually start off with bands that we're going to do their discographies, we always talk about where this band came into our lives. And for me, I was a child, and I think, like a lot of people who were young in the 80s, you would listen to classic rock radio, and
Yep.
you would hear Tom Sawyer, Spirit of Radio, Limelight, those things. And probably around, I started to get really interested in their music, 89, 90. But then I think it was either 1990 or 91 where my older brother bought me the compilation Chronicles, Rush Chronicles. And so I was 12 or 11 or 12. And I just remember like feeling like this was the most sophisticated rock music I'd ever listened to. And it was a really big deal for me, because I think that was the moment I started to really pay attention to what musicians were actually doing in music. Because prior to that, it was just rock music, and maybe I paid attention to the guitar player the most. Maybe if there was a drum solo, I'd pay attention to the drummer. But I think Rush was a band that was the originally the beginning of me starting to pull apart all the pieces of a particular thing and be like, oh, well, he's because they all three have such unique voices in every Rush song. Geddy and Alex and Neil all are very like, it's some bands, everything's just a big hodgepodge, and it comes out as it comes out. But these sound like three individual musicians with their own unique spin on what they're doing, so that was it for me. So I became a Rush fan, and gradually over the years I became a bigger and bigger and bigger Rush fan. And then flash forward to the past 5 to 10 years, it's gotten to the point now where they're one of my favorites, and I love every single album. So this ranking was really tough for me, because literally just an hour ago, I was going through my notes and listening to a little bit off of the albums that I'm going to be talking about on today's episode. And even then, I almost started rearranging them again.
Yeah. This
so
is going to be.
I had to stop.
I was going to say, this is going to be one of the most rapid approaches to the love zone of any band we've done,
because you're pretty much so prior to doing this, how much Rush did you actually know?
I knew these albums are as follows. So I knew 2112.
Uh-huh.
I knew that one pretty well. It's a classic. Same as Moving Pictures, a little bit of Permanent Waves as well. So really the big ones that get talked about the most. But I also, happened upon the I think this was like a borrowed CD from my uncle. He had the
Mhm.
retrospectives
Yeah.
album,
Mhm.
so that had a pretty across the board thing. And I knew a lot of, well, most of the hits from Rush,
Yeah.
but like they're not just a greatest hits band. Like they are a whole discography band. These guys fucking rule. Like,
Yeah, absolutely
yeah.
agree. And so, just for the comfort of the individuals out there who've joined us, who are really big Rush fans, as far as I know, you didn't just go listen to every album one time. It seems like you went a little more in depth than that.
Who, me? Yeah.
Yeah,
I went back through a couple times and listened to each of the albums. I think I got through most of the albums at least twice, some of them three times.
yeah,
Um, and they're one of those bands that really does benefit from repeat listens,
hmm,
because for a band of just three people, there's so much going on,
hmm,
sonically. Um, Especially when you get into like the 80s and stuff, and how layered everything is, and eventually they kind of become a mishmash of their 70s, 80s, like everything they'd done to that point, and they just kind of keep evolving from there.
yeah.
And like, whew, man, like
I mean,
this was an undertaking, but it was worth every minute because it was all enjoyable,
so
you
this
know?
is kind of like the reverse of when we did Toto, because
Yeah, yeah.
and I guess Judas Priest too. Whereas you knew the stuff pretty well, and I was pretty much brand new,
Yeah, you're
especially
leading
with
the charge
Toto.
here. Yeah.
So yeah, but like I said, I'm not an Uber fan. So if we do have people that are joining us that are, we're just two dudes that love music and love talking about music. Neither one of us, especially me, is claiming to be a Rush expert. Um, but so today we're going to be ranking the bottom third, which we've decided because it's 19 albums total. But
Yeah.
we decided to this is going to be the bottom 7, and then episode 2 and 3 will be 6, and two more groupings of 6. So I mean,
Mm.
you probably know math, so I didn't need to help with that. Um, so yeah, and so this is probably the roughest episode for me because
Mm.
I didn't want anything to be last. Like
Same.
no
Yeah.
album needed to be last. So at one point I had to just kind of walk away because I had rearranged things 2 or 3 times and finally just said, okay, at the end of the day, who the fuck cares? Who cares what my opinion is? It's, as we say on this show often, the ranking is the least important part of the episode. The most important part is talking about the band's discography and the band, and having a conversation. So if you're down for that, you're in the right place. If you're new, I just have a feeling that maybe there's going to be a handful of Rush fans that are saying, "Oh, who are these assholes?" So yeah, welcome to our show, Cranked and Ranked Assholes. Um,
At least we can take solace in the fact that we know that with our rankings, there's really no wrong answer because it's
no,
all good stuff, man. Like
yeah,
calling a Rush album like the worst, I would go as far as to say least favorite in this case.
sure. Rush has they have like their albums own. They don't even have a not good album.
Mm,
They either have amazing, fucking awesome, or great. Like that is
yeah.
those are the 3 levels of Rush albums.
I literally
And
split it up into good tier, great tier, and classic tier. Like
yeah,
that's
that's
how I divided the list up.
yeah. And you said you had an interesting way of coming at your ranking. So I'm interested to hear how that goes, because it is tricky, because I would say that there are 3 distinct eras of Rush.
Yes.
Originally in the 70s, which leads, the 70s sound all the way through them being the proggiest they were ever going to be. Obviously, the second era in the 80s, when the keyboards come in and things get a little bit simplified. And then in the early 90s, I would say that's when the third era of Rush really starts, where it's like you said, they do kind of pull from things that they had already done, but it's almost like a more relaxed and confident version of what they did. They're not trying to like, you know, there are really cool parts, but it's almost like they're not trying to be flashy all the time, or have odd time signatures all the time or whatever. um it's interesting going through their discography in that respect, when you go from the first album to the last, just hearing their story, which I've said many times on this podcast, that what makes a band a favorite band of mine is when you go through their discography, the story and how things unfold and how their sound evolves and changes or reverts, or whatever happens with whatever band you're talking about. That's what makes them a great band to me. So a band like this, you're going to hear um a lot of nice things coming out of my mouth,
Yeah.
because they are the ultimate for that kind of discography. So I guess, yeah, if you have anything to add, we'll do that now. But otherwise, I say we jump into our bottom. It sounds bad to say bottom. The lower third 7 of Rush.
Cool. So my number 19 Rush album is Vapor Trails.
Okay, all right.
So this is the first Rush album since 96, after some really unfortunate, sad family bereavements in Neil Peart's life.
Yeah.
Like, how the dude even carried on the way he did, knowing he lost his wife and daughter in the same year. Like, no wonder he had to take some time away, because holy shit.
Yeah, I mean, and at that point, the future of the band was uncertain. I don't know if you've ever seen the Rush documentary, Beyond the Lighted Stage. I highly recommend it if you haven't, because it's just enjoyable anyway. But
I literally had it like queued up in Netflix, and when I went back to watch it, it wasn't there, so it's not on there.
No way, that's fucking
Yeah.
lame.
Yeah, I know. I was like, oh, right when we were supposed to do Rush, the documentary evaporated. Like,
but they do talk about how, you know, Alex and Geddy, you know, they, at certain times they were assuming that Rush was just done, completely done.
yeah.
So yeah, but this is I guess their comeback from all of that, and especially Neil's comeback from all of that.
Yeah, some heavy shit. But like, even this album opens really well. Like, you got Our Little Victory, like, oh shit, this is heavy. Like, there's like double kick right out of the gate, kind of like, it's kind of like it in the riff department. It reminds me of the what's it called, Miserlou.
Oh yeah,
It has a similar kind of vibe to that.
Yeah,
but you know, in a much more groovy kind of prog rock sense, and it's a really groovy song. Ceiling Unlimited has this like airy, soaring sort of sound to it. It's like one of those songs that sounds like you're flying through the clouds, you know? Ghost Rider is this vibey rock song. I'll end up saying that a lot on this album, and this is going to be one of my critiques here at the end. Peaceable Kingdom is a groovy track. It kind of reminds me of like what would happen if someone put Arabian kind of melodies over a Rage Against the Machine song in a strange way. See, that's the thing. They were always pulling from other stuff, but they still made it their own, you know? They didn't at any point not sound like Rush. But they always managed to make their sound fresh, you know? Stars Look Down, vibey grooves, cool vocals from Geddy Lee. How It Is like, it feels like a bit of a throwback to some of their 70s stuff at times. Vapor Trail, cool song. Secret Touch, another cool vibey track. Earthshine. I think there's a lot of really cool ideas on this album, but a lot of them are quite similar. They're all kind of in a similar wheelhouse. Sweet Miracle, pretty cool song, great vocal parts. Nocturne is this slow burner that really goes off when it wants to. Freeze, part 4 of Fear, proggy song. And, you know, Out of the Cradle, this airy, vibey closing rock track. This album, to me, all in all, the reason it's down here at the bottom it's a bit too samey to justify its length, and it has a production style that doesn't do them enough justice compared to other albums.
Are you, is the version you heard the remixed version or the original?
See, I heard the remix, but I heard that the original was, there's a reason they remixed it.
It's a little bit brick walled
Mm.
and compressed.
So it sounded a little murky as well.
I honestly like things about both mixes. I think the remix is easily better, but the original one, there's an energy to it that's, because that's how I first heard it. And so so because of that, that's just how the album sounds. And so the remix version, I had to get kind of used to it, but I think in the end it is better.
Yeah, this is one of those cases where you could argue that the remix did it better, because like sometimes, you know, you and I both can be quite picky with when a band will remaster something, and they'll like remove the personality of the album. Say like when Pearl Jam took the reverb off of 10, and I was like, no, that's why I like 10. Like, put it back. But yeah, for me, it's good.
Mm-hmm.
I can't call any Rush album less than good, but it's a production meets running time issue for me, and that is kind of a recipe for dropping to the bottom of the list for me. So yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. So my number 19. I hate that any album had to go at the last place. But after much stressing and reorganizing, my 19 became Snakes and Arrows from 2007.
Okay.
Which is their 18th album. And I really feel like, you know, what you're referring to, like with Vapor Trails, like they sound to me like reinvigorated on that album, and Snakes and Arrows is kind of a continuation of the reinvigorated Rush. But here's the thing, like, just when I kept going back to this album, I had to like listen to them in different ways for my ranking. Because first there's just, you know, the how I feel about them, and then, you know, is how different is it from what they've already done? How did they move forward in this particular album? And then at the very end, it became like, how many bangers, like how many songs make me go, oh, and so I started just having to number that. Like, you know, I had to think of all these different ways to like order things. And at the end, like this one, I guess had the least amount of the bangers, if you will. But the thing is, this is, you know, their dead last album, in my opinion, but it's way better than anything their contemporaries have done. You know, it's like any band from that era that's still doing stuff now and was still doing stuff in 2007, were not putting out this level of quality in music.
Yeah.
And I guess it ended up going here because, to me, following Vapor Trails, this one isn't quite as interesting to me. It's still really good. But the problem with a lot of later Rush albums is that there's they like you said, there's a merging of things that they had done, and there all of a sudden becomes a middle of the road Rush, where it's not anything surprising. It's things like, oh, well, I clearly I knew that they could do this. And so I think with Snakes and Arrows, it veers way too much into the middle of, you know, stuff that, you know, isn't really surprising, but is still, you know, top quality shit. So, so yeah, it just, that with the later albums, that's another thing I had to take into account. Like, how much middle of the road do they go? Because I'm okay with middle of the road Rush, but I like it when they sprinkle in some things here and there where you weren't quite expecting it, which they do on every album. I just think in this one, in Snakes and Arrows, it's the least amount of me kind of going, ooh, yeah, out of all their albums. So that's my number 19, Snakes and Arrows.
Cool. So my number 18 is Test for Echo.
Okay.
So, like, I think this album is underrated as far as albums go, but if we're doing a Rush ranking, it like as I said, no Rush album is below good, and I'm gonna get into that.
Yeah.
Test for Echo, vibey and heavy. Like I love the like kind of jangly clean guitars at times. I love the opening track a lot. Has it, but it has like a little bit of a Tool vibe to it. Again, pulling from kind of contemporary stuff, but applying it to their core sound. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Driven is this riffy rocker, really cool song.
Speaking of that, you could say the riff from Driven sounds kind of Tool also. Doodle doodle
Yeah,
doodle 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 doodle. You know, it does have a. I mean, I think that they had to have been fans of Tool. You know,
yeah,
I mean, it's just they seem like they're cut from the same cloth, really.
yeah. I definitely get that vibe a few times on this album. Like Half the World. There's a lot of real cool vibey instrumentation going on here. It's a
Uh,
very sonically interesting album, and it's like Half the World is pretty damn catchy. These first three songs left me much more impressed than the things I'd heard about this album. You know, people saying the album, if any Rush album was like sleepwalked through, but even then, this album is really cool. The Color of
yeah.
Right has some nice guitar melodies in it. Time and Motion. I think this album definitely took hints from their like 90s prog contemporaries a decent amount. You know, I know Rush influenced prog bands like Dream Theater, but again, sonically, this album has a lot of moments that make me think, yep, this is the mid 90s prog metal sound a lot of times.
Yeah.
Again, still sounds unique to them though. Totem sounds like a 70s Rush song with 90s production. Dog Years has kind of like Motorhead vibes in the riffage.
Mm-hmm.
Virtuality is really groovy. Resist is this big cerebral ballad sounding track. Limbo, another very cerebral thing. And then you get Carve Away the Stone, which is this vibey rock closer. Again, the album's vibe is really cool, but I it's not so much a case of I think this album isn't good. It's that they made even better than this.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is the
Yeah.
most positive bottom episode we've ever done.
It's absolutely true. And also, for those of you who are playing the drinking game at home, this is our first matchup. My number 18 is also Test for Echo
Hey,
from 1996. That so it's their 16th album. Like, and I would say, like, you know, sonically speaking, it sounds really good. Like production wise, sounds great. This is them well into, you know, third era Rush, where
yeah,
they kind of switched gears a little bit, and the middle of the road stuff has already started to happen, and there is some of that on this album. But so in that respect, I would compare it, you know, to Snakes and Arrows. But this one does have, I guess I understand why somebody would say Sleepwalk Through, because it does have a more relaxed vibe, even in the heavier parts. It seems a little more understated than what they're known for doing. It could be the production style as well that leads to that. But this one, for the most part, you know, ended up not being number 19 because it's got more a higher amount of bangers, in my opinion. You know, and I talked about Driven is a fucking great song, but so many songs have parts that just I think are amazing. Like Virtuality is a really good example, because it does start off with something that I'm just like, oh fuck, I forgot how because eventually, because that's the thing, starting in the mid 80s or so, you know, Rush, you know, the music along with Neil's lyrics, they started to get really good at just writing songs where there didn't need to be an odd time signature or create or heavy riffs. It's almost like the I would say that in the 70s, you used your brain a lot when listening to Rush. And then in the 80s, you used your heart a little more.
Yeah.
In some of the stuff that they were writing. And they got really good at that, to where like they don't need to do that all the time. So you would get those sections in an album where you would have a song where you just like kind of get lost in how beautiful it is, and then the next song would have some sort of riff that you just go, oh, all right, here we are again.
Yeah.
And Test for Echo has a lot of that going on for me, but once again, it does suffer from the middle of the road stuff a little bit too much. And at the end of the day, like, you know, comparing albums like this to albums that are lower in my list, like or higher in my list, I guess you would say. Yeah, something had to go somewhere at the end, and the ones that don't make me want to just jump out of my chair are the ones that ended up close to the end. And Test for Echo is a great album, it's definitely a grower. Like I like it more now than I did when it came out.
Yeah.
But yeah, it ends up at number 18 for our first matchup. I didn't think for some reason I thought we wouldn't match up at all. I just had a feeling that our ranking was just going to be completely all over the place from each other. But
we've still got 17 albums,
but we're kind of in the same area though. We're already, you know, we've started off kind of in the same zone, but let's see where it goes from here.
Cool. Well, to kind of keep it to that same zone, my number 17 is Snakes and Arrows. So
all right.
Yeah, like this album, again, it's cool, but it's middle of the road considering some of the rest of their catalog, you know. Far Cry, awesome opening track, sleazy riffs, much better production than its predecessor. Armor and Sword, some real vibey groovage here. Working Them Angels is a great song, love that one. The Larger Bowl, kind of ballady prog track, like it. Spindrift, it's like heavy and mysterious. The Main Monkey Business, great title of a song there. That's a cool title. But like the riffs in it are killer. The Way the Wind Blows feels like a modern take on their more bluesy 70s rock songs. I feel like there's at least one song on these later albums that you could at least one track you could directly trace to their 70s work. Hope is this nice folky instrumental. Faithless, big cerebral song. Bravest Face, also rather cerebral. That's an adjective I'm going to use a lot in this because it's brainy music, it's very it's very smartly crafted stuff. Good News First, rockin' song with a cool solo. Malignant Narcissism, that could almost be a death song, couldn't it? Like, looking at the title of it, but it's a cool instrumental. It's got a nice Eastern flavor to it, which I love. We Hold On is a great closer. Honestly, like if it wasn't for the sheer amount of bangers that they'd already done, this would still be a enjoyed release. And I mean, damn, dude, to be this late in the game putting this quality stuff out still, like you say, compared to a lot of their contemporaries, like there's not a lot of like latter day stuff from a lot of bands that I will revisit nearly as much as their early stuff. However, with Rush, I don't think that matters because they were just good from the start and kept being good till they were gone. Like,
plus they didn't go through that unfortunate period that a lot of these bands do, not just 70s bands, but 80s bands we've talked about too, where in the 2000s, they all seemed to be struggling with what the fuck they want to do or how to do it. And so, and Rush never, I mean, I'm sure, internally they struggled to figure out what the fuck they wanted to do. But in the end, it's like for those of us who are fans, it was just a confidence that, yeah, they may have their struggles, but in the end, they're going to come out and we're going to get something that's going to be, of a really high quality, because that's all they ever did.
Yeah. And man, like this is going to be an absolute love fest. Like when when people have got this queued up to listen to, they could end up with like almost like 7 hours worth of just Rush worship to listen to on a bad day. If you're having a shitty day, just binge this 3-parter.
Yeah, us in a good mood.
Yeah.
So okay, so here's where I leave you. I'm gonna travel away from you a little bit for my number 17. I'm actually going way back.
As we go a little something like this.
Yeah.
Kick it.
Not as way back as you might think. 1989. My number 17 album is Presto from 1989, which is their 13th album. And Presto is, easily like the beginning of them transitioning out of the keyboard era, although there's still plenty of keyboards on this album. And the guitars might be more prominent, but the production style says 80s. Yeah. It's very much so.
I think sonically it's the most me Rush album production.
Probably there's a lot of reverb. There's a lot of reverb in there. But comparatively speaking, it does have a very big rock energy to it, even though it still does have the keys and some 80s tropes, I guess, of production. But it's got a lot of really strong songs. And while this ends up at 17, because to me it is a bit of a transitional album. So it has that feel to me where I think that you do kind of hear them kind of, not quite comfortable in their skin.
Yeah. What do we do?
Figuring out where they want to go, but still putting out this fantastic album. And not only that, there's songs on here, like a song like Scars is a really good indication that they still have like such a desire to experiment, and that's what I like. And I think that pretty much never, I would say once you got well into the 90s, it wasn't so obvious, the experimentation, but that's the thing that I like about a lot of their earlier stuff, is that you would always have something in there where you could tell that they had an idea and they weren't quite, we have never really done something like this before. Let's run with it. And I like that kind of shit. So there are some less interesting moments on this album, but overall, it's a really engaging album. And I do think, even though I'm putting it here at 17, I would say that this is an underrated Rush album, because I think that it does probably in the same way that Test for Echo does. It has a quality that feels a little more light. But I think once again, that probably has to do with the production and not necessarily with the performances, because like I said, there's plenty of guitar on this album. But in the end, it went here just because of the transitional nature of it, and the fact that the album that came before it and the album that came after it are really strong albums, and this one is just a really good album. So it ended up at number 17, Presto.
Cool. So my number 16. Now I think we could deviate here, because I tried to rejig some of my things here, but I just in the end it kept winding up the same way. My number 16 is Clockwork Angels.
Okay. That's your first shocked face you're going to get from me in this ranking.
Yeah, I could get a few. And again, it's not a jab at the quality of stuff on here. It's more of an appraisal of the things that managed to be above it. Because
let's pause here for a second, because I'm going to tell you this right now.
I'm wrong.
This album is out of all their albums, this is the one that grows insanely. the more you
Yeah.
listen to it. So I really think that give yourself a whole lot of time. You're going to go back to it one day and be like, wait, I put this where?
Yeah.
Like it's going to happen at some point. Mark my words. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I have like, and again, I think Rush albums have been, barring one of them, have been across the board well produced.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I just have a few biases towards like the 70s and
Yeah.
80s sounds.
We both have to let our preferences come through,
Yeah.
personal preferences. Yeah.
But like, my God, this is still a case of going out with a bang. Like, holy shit, they went out on a high for this to be their
Hell yeah.
last record. Like, god damn. Caravan, sleazy riffs in this one, as well as having a cool chorus to it. BU2B. The grooves in this are ace. Clockwork Angels, that like, it's that intellectual Rush sound in full effect.
Mm-hmm.
Again. Also, I want to state, like, this is the most solid album they'd done in like 20 years. In terms of like confidence, songs, vibe, production, it's all there.
Yeah.
Like, I think of all of the latter day Rush albums, I think people will likely say this one, has aged will age the best, I guess, like as a swan song.
I mean, it already has. Like it's, in the time from it coming out to now, for me, it's gone from an album that I thought was really great to being an album that is
Stands
like
against
it's
the
fucking
classics.
It's a beautiful album to me.
Yeah.
And every track.
The Anarchist is awesome. Like, again, this late in the game that they're still putting out quality stuff. Like, no one is bored of the Rush sound,
Yeah.
Carney's heavy groovage, yes please.
Mm-hmm.
Halo Effect, big old song with plenty of orchestration. Seven Cities of Gold, again, that nice sassy riffage once again.
Mm-hmm.
The Wreckers, everything they write sounds so grand, like they just shit gold,
Yeah.
Headlong Flight is just some fast driving rock. Love that.
Mm-hmm.
BU2B2 is this short but sweet little track. Wish Them Well. More Rush doing what they do best. And The Garden, like, what a song to go out on. Like, their legacy is going to echo for generations to come.
Yeah.
Oh man, like, even
and this is why and this album is the kind of thing. What I'm trying to remember it was Black Sabbath. Like, this is what I'm talking about. How when I listen to 13 by Black Sabbath, and it's such a depressing end to a band, but then on the other hand, you get Clockwork Angels, which is like it's an amazing album to me, but also it makes me kind of sad because I'm all like, oh man, what would they have done after this? But would I have wanted that, because maybe it would have been still really good, but not quite as good as Clockwork Angels. And it's one of those things where things happen the way that they happen, and I think it wrapped up perfectly, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, damn, dude. For my number 16 to still be this, it's indicative of how fucking good a discography this is, man. Like, wow.
Yeah.
Like, I'm even looking at the upper parts of my list to remind myself why I put that there, and I'm like,
well,
I still agree with myself, but
it's easy
I feel dirty,
Yeah, it's also easy to forget because we're just waiting around in these albums. But then if you really take a glance at what we haven't talked about, it's like, oh well, yeah, of course, of course, we'll get there. But honestly, like my number 16 is another album that, like, I put it here and I'm like, oh, why did I put it this low? but it ended up here. My number 16 is Counterparts from 1993.
Fair.
Which is their 15th album. To me, this is the true beginning of the third era of Rush. It starts with Counterparts, and then wraps up with Clockwork Angels. Because it's the first one where they've shedded every last bit of the 80s. Like I feel like
Yeah.
even Roll the Bones, I love that album, but it's still, even in 91, there's a little bit of 80s left over in that, whereas Counterparts, I feel like they were fully in the 90s. And you could even say that with, because I remember
Yeah.
watching Headbangers Ball, and the Headbangers Ball played the video for Stick It Out. And I just remember being like, I was already into Rush, but I was like, they got heavier.
Yeah.
And there's a few songs on this album that are heavy, but I would say, you know, if you're coming into this album thinking it's all heavy, then it's not. It's
Mm.
you know, it's just as varied as every, you know, Rush album. But it does start off like really, really, really strong.
Mm.
And then like I've been saying with a lot of these albums with Counterparts, later on in the album, it does get a little bit middle of the road, a little bit safe. But it's still a very solid album. And at the time, it was a big thing because it kind of proved that they were a band that had staying power, because this was 1993. So
Yeah.
the guard has already changed over to grunge. Grunge is already, to some people, old news. And,
Yeah.
you know, they come out with something that, you know, doesn't necessarily sound like they're trying to be trend hopping with the little bit of heaviness on songs like Stick It Out, but they sound just as vital and relevant as they did in the 80s. You know, it's like, so it's that alone makes it a really cool album, because it seems like they don't really give two shits about what's going on trend wise in music, but they also do seem like the kind of dudes that were probably on top of that and probably enjoyed a lot of that shit. You know, I'm pretty sure they were into the, you know, grunge bands, and I know they were, you know, they were buds with, you know, other bands that were not necessarily Rush type bands.
Mm.
You know, so I think that when Counterparts came around, it was just, you know, it was just one of those things where, like, you know, an older band still has the juice to put out something that stands up with all the other things that are happening in 1993. But I do think that, you know, it does have a bit of a safety element in some of the songs that they didn't. I feel like I don't know if I would have liked it if they had gone heavy the entire album or not. Because I like that they were honest to who they were, but I feel like this album would have been higher on my list if it had been a statement of, oh, we're a rock band, you know, here's some heavy ass shit. Out, you know, because like some people would have hated that, but I probably would have left it. But it ends up at number 16 just because of that. It's got really strong shit. It's a very solid album, but it still has a little bit of middle of the roadness to some of it. But does have some fucking killer songs on it. And when I say killer songs, like, that's the thing, is I always like to point out that, like, I'm not there are people who are more in the 70s Rush camp and people who are more in the 80s or later Rush camp, like but my preferences are all over the place.
Yeah.
Because, you know, some of my favorite Rush stuff, like if I compiled all my favorite songs, they go through every era and they go through every style of song. It doesn't just have to be, you know, a proggy epic song, which I would love. It could also be something on Counterparts that's a little more heartfelt, you know?
Yeah.
Nobody's hero. That great example, Nobody's Hero. So it's they do have those songs that literally, like, I feel it in my heart. Like, it's like, I'm like, how did they, you know, it's the combination of the song, obviously the musicians and Neil's lyrics, where he just had such a poetic, but yet not, it was a welcoming way. He would word things really well. Like, he was clearly very well read and very good at writing lyrics, but his lyrics never came across as pretentious, like there was a wall between you and him. It was like he was inviting you in to whatever it is he was writing about. And so it's really easy to get lost in that, because it feels like sometimes the songs are kind of about you. You know, it's, you know, they're I think every Rush fan has that has at least a handful of songs where they go, I relate so much to this song. And I don't know, going off on that tangent, but yeah, Counterparts has kind of both of those things going on it. But yeah, so things had to go lower down. Counterparts ends up at number 16.
Cool. So now we approach like the 15 zone.
Wow.
Anything this low, it hurt me to put it here, you know? Like
Yeah.
this is the part where it starts getting painful to see it in this episode, but
Yeah.
like I will say I think I did a pretty damn good job of keeping it fair to every era because I'm pretty much about to list off one from each that came out at the bottom. So my number 15 is Roll the Bones.
Oh, all right.
I know.
I mean, that one's a personal favorite. Spoiler alert, but I do understand it being in this episode.
Well, here's the thing, right? And again, like I said at the start, when it comes to a Rush list, there's like no wrong answer. This list could change on any day because it depends on the mood. It depends on the mood I'm in. Like if I want to hear like a 20-minute song, 70s Rush is where you go. If you want to listen to a, heavily affected Geddy Lee rap on a song, I go to this one,
Yeah.
I
mean, I don't even know. Is that Geddy Lee's voice? This is where the real Rush fans come in and tell me who actually does that part.
I looked into it. He's got an effect on it. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's one, sometimes you don't know, you don't want to know how the sausage is made. But and I'm pretty sure I probably read that it was him that did the vocals there, but I just sort of let it slip out of my mind. And I'm just like, I don't want to know. I just want this part of the song just to be this cool, because the song is already affected in a way for me because there was a later, I don't remember if it was the Time Machine tour or the 40 tour, but they would sometimes have videos play behind them, and then when they got to the rap part of Roll the Bones, it was all these different people, like celebrities and whatnot, doing it, and one of them was Jason Segel and Paul Rudd doing it. Because I don't know. Here's the point where I ask you the really important question: have you seen the movie I Love You, Man?
I have not.
Okay, so do yourself a favor, because it is one of my favorite movies ever. A big part of that is because it has a lot to do with Rush, and so that always makes me happy when I get to that part. I remember seeing Paul Rudd and Jason Segel kind of rapping that part. But I Love You, Man is a movie that I went to go see it in the theater only because I've always been a fan of Paul Rudd. I have a man crush on him, as I assume many people do, and he just makes me laugh. And I like Jason Segel as well. And so I just went to this movie like, oh, let's go see this funny comedy movie. And then like 20 or 30 minutes into the movie, all of a sudden they start talking about Rush, and then Rush becomes like a part, a kind of a part of the story. And I'm just like, this is amazing. And Rush are in the movie. I mean, they perform in the movie. But I just love that movie so much. It is so fucking funny. And like,
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, but yeah, it's just the Rush conversations and parts alone make that movie amazing. But it's just a really great movie. But anyway, Roll the Bones. Hey, that was a tangent, but still related to what we were talking about.
Hell yeah. Like this, like I'm gonna jump right into the songs. Let's get talking about the music, man. So yeah, Dreamline.
Yeah,
this album it's the next logical step from Presto. Like it still has that big late 80s, early 90s production, but it's again another step in the more guitar driven zone than it is. Like there's a very clear lineage you can trace from Presto all the way up to where they would end up in the modern day, because it's like, okay, guitars are back, still a lot of synth. Guitars are back again, slightly less synth, but it's still there. And then you get
Still
to
there.
counterparts, and then it's like synths are in the past for now. Might
Yeah.
come back, but we're heavy right now,
Yeah.
ish. But like, yeah, Roll the Bones. This is one of those albums that could climb like 7 places on the right day.
Yeah.
But I mean, Bravado has some vibey stuff in it, almost
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
U2 sounding at points. But my God, like Neil Peart's drumming in the like this song, I'm pretty sure it's Bravado, is like a fucking lesson in limb independence, man. Like some of the stuff he plays from time to time, just like, huh? And he has this way of making it look easy, you
Oh
know,
yeah, yeah, for sure.
like, and some drummers you look at them play and it's like, oh wow, yeah, he's really having to like mull that over in his head, and whereas like Neil makes it look so effortless. Like he's into it, but he's like, I could do this while writing a fucking term paper, man. Like
Yeah.
it's like, but
And he
oh
and he,
man,
pur- and he purposely made shit more complicated for himself, which later on
yeah,
he was kicking himself for that. But I mean, just the fact that like your normal drummers, they have, there's great drummers, but they've got their drum kit. But he ended up, evolving to having a drum kit that wrapped all the way around him and
yeah.
had like
That's the dream.
chimes and bells
Yeah.
and electronic drum pads that he incorporated, and
And a fucking xylophone thing.
xylophones, wood blocks. Like and that's why like I he's an amazing drummer as a drummer, but the thing that I loved about him is that he was not just happy being that. He wanted to have more to do with the actual song. And so
Yeah.
that's why like he would play the xylophone, or whatever needed for a particular song. And so it's almost like his importance in the band, you could say that he was the most important person in that band, because not only did he play the drums that well, he added all these other elements into the songs, and he wrote the fucking lyrics. So it's like, he was the guy. That's why, like, when he died, like it was sad because Neil died. It was even more sad because you're just like, that, well, Rush is done. Like, even though they had already said they were done, you always had that thing in the back of your head where you're like, maybe we'll get like at least maybe a one-off show, something. Or maybe we'll at least just get something where we get to see the guys hanging out. Because that's one of the best things in the world, is this, when those three guys are together just talking and cutting up, and you're just like, I love their relationship with each other is infectious. And so, so obviously like he's gone, and I'm like, well, that's the book of Rush is closed and nailed the fuck shut.
Yeah, because he was such an integral part of the whole thing. He wrote a sizable portion, most of the lyrics too. And it's, with barring the first album with John Rutsey, that's his name, isn't it?
John Rutsey.
That's the only other dude really who was in Rush. The rest of it was them being a power trio through thick and thin, and it's one of those things as well where it's like you see certain bands and you can tell it's like a business relationship, whereas like with a band like Rush, for example, it's kind of wholesome where they're like friends,
Well, I mean, you watch any Rush show, I guarantee you several times during that show, Alex or Getty will lean into the other one and whisper something to them, and that makes the other one laugh. And I'm all, I want to know what they're talking about. What did he say to him right there? So it's almost like they just have such a great time together. And it's like, that's the thing that's so great, is that, how some bands have a real lighthearted and fun way that they go about, presenting themselves, and that ends up making people think the music is fucking jokey, which is unfortunate. But Rush are a band that if you're a really big fan of Rush, like I think one of the words that you would say when people say, well, what kind of band was Rush? Like as people, I think funny would be one of the first things that you would say is that they were funny, but nobody is saying that Rush is a funny band. They're, because their music wasn't like that, and and so I think that's pretty unique for them, because they do have that quality where it just seemed like they were always just having such a good time and always making each other laugh, but yet they were making this music that just fucking changed people's lives and affect them even today. Even new people getting into them, being affected by them. It's never going to stop. So it's amazing. Like I can't imagine, what it's like to be in a band like that. I know those dudes are probably humble as fuck about it, but still, being like, that a band that has that kind of fan base and has made that kind of mark in people's, like in their lives, in their personal lives. Some people listen to music and then they move about their day. But I think there's with bands like Rush, the fans, like, it shit's a part of your life. So it's gotta be crazy.
It's dedication. Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, like Roll the Bones itself, the song, it goes to show that they were never afraid of experimentation.
Sure.
And that shows, it really shows in their music. Funky, sneaky rock track with like super kick-ass New Jack Swing synth brass stabs in there, and again,
and literally the chorus is like, the lyrics of the chorus, it's kind of like, if you were going to explain like my mentality on things, why are we here? Because we're here. Roll the bones. Why does it happen? Because it happens. Roll the bones. It's like that's literally how I feel. And I could never, because you think about it, it's such a simple way to put it. Why does it happen? Because it happens. I could never have thought that up. Neil thought that up. And it so perfectly sums up just how I live my life. Like, you can't get bogged down in the whys, and because at the end it doesn't matter.
There's a way about the lyrics of this band that cause you to have an epiphany. Like, there's just like, there's certain times, like this past month, I've just been binging this discography, and like, I feel like everybody has kind of like the post New Year blues, where you're kind of like, oh fuck, oh shit, another one of these, and it's like, but there were a few times during this, Roll the Bones in particular is one of those where it's like, damn, dude, you know what? this guy's spitting some straight facts,
Yeah.
And even if even if you got like the tongue in cheek, gonna kick some gluteus max, even like, how the fuck did a song with that line make me feel such a deep psychological response?
Exactly. Exactly. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, unfortunately that section is what a lot of people harp on. And I'm just like, well, that's when, I know we say that not everybody's ranking or everybody's opinion, it's all valid, but I'd say there are certain people that are so closed off to shit that I'm just like, your opinion means nothing to me, because you're so, because there's a point where you're so limited and focused in on certain aspects that just don't fit the mold of what you're wanting, that, if you're going to start spouting your opinions on things, and I just go, well, I'm going to take that with a grain of salt, with a fucking huge grain of salt,
just a big old cube.
Yeah.
But oh man, like,
where were we in that album? I don't remember.
we're literally on the title track.
Okay.
I mean, again, I know I kind of,
we talked about Bravado, I thought.
we had to talk about the hilariously 1991 hip hop section, but all in all, that is an incredibly strong song. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
um, Face Up is this upbeat driving rocker.
Mhm.
Where's My Thing is funky.
Yeah.
Big Wheel is this big cool rock song. Heresy is a power ballad sort of track. I really like this one. Ghost of a Chance is like
Oh,
secret agent music right here. Like
Ghost of a
I
Chance is that's another one. That's another
yeah.
one. The fuck, man. I believe there's a ghost of a chance we can find someone to love and make it last. God, fuck you, Neil.
Yeah.
Why you got to do that to me?
I didn't sign up to be psychoanalyzed.
I know, man.
But that's the thing. You put on one of these albums and it really is like the thinking man's rock and roll, you know.
Sure.
Neurotica, some cool whoa-ohing in the chorus, always keen for that. You Bet Your Life is this anthemic closer. And this album is very of its time in the best possible way. Like it like showcases it's no secret as to when it came out, you know,
Yeah.
but the music is incredible, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I again that's just once again another testament to the quality of this discography. Is just for me to be praising an album that is 15 slots down
Yeah.
like that, you know,
Yeah.
it's wild, you know, and that is why Roll the Bones clocked in at my number 15, and I'm about to talk about some more incredible albums to come.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, over to you.
Okay. My number 15, moving back into the 2000s. My number 15 is Vapor Trails from 2002. And I actually went and listened to the original mix and the remix just to sort of remind myself of the differences between the two. And like I said, at the end, I was like, yeah, it's pretty clear the remixed is sounds better. But this album is a special album to me because it's not one of my absolute favorites, but there's a lot of things on it that I like. And this was the tour that I got to see them, was on the Vapor Trails tour. And it was and I remember that it was um the tour where he may have done this more than once, but you know, you've got the stage set up and you've got Alex and he's got Marshall Stacks behind him. And then you've got Getty and he has washing machines with loads of laundry going in them behind him.
Yeah.
And I just thought that's fucking great. At some point, I think they had fucking like rotisserie chicken ovens behind him too. So like that's fucking great. But the one thing I remember, because I went to go see them on that tour with my drummer of the band I was in at the time, who was a really big Rush fan as well. And I remember at one point, you know, during one of the big tracks, probably Tom Sawyer, I don't know, but I just remember kind of looking around the place and I was like, this is an entire show filled with dudes and their sons, and they're all air drumming. It was an entire sea of little kids and their dads, and we're all air drumming at the same time.
And I love it, man.
Yeah. And it was I just remember it was just an experience, and it was fun. It was like, you know, a shared moment with all of these other dudes, you know, because, you know, if there it is kind of a joke that there's never really any women at a Rush show, but I honestly don't remember seeing any at that one. But it's I know they're there. I've seen concert footage where there are women. They're there, but it really did feel like it's probably the best sausage fest I've ever been to. So, you know, But anyway, that's a really big deal for this album because it was the new album at the time, and I was, I was really big on it and thought, because like you said, like this came after a 6-year gap where, not only did Neil's daughter die in a car accident, and then Neil's wife died months later from cancer.
Awful.
And then as the story goes, Neil just got on his motorcycle and he just started writing. He Forrest Gumped it. Like he just, he just left. And the reason why this album to me is so great is because there is an energy that just, they sound like a reinvigorated band, because that, like I said, they went through a period where, they were unsure if, they were continuing at all. And now they made it back through, and it almost feels like they needed it. Like it's, because like you said, like it's their relationship with each other isn't a business. And so I think at the end of the day, even though, Neil went through so much, and Alex and Geddy were perfectly open to it being the end, if that's what he wanted. Turns out he didn't. And it almost seems like that just gave him a kick in the ass, and like, oh yeah, we love this. Like we love playing together and writing together. And I feel like it really comes across on the album. It has a really passionate vibe all the way through it.
Yeah.
And honestly, songwriting wise, I would say compared to the things that were happening in the 90s, the songwriting on this album is actually a bit more adventurous, not just in the structure of the songs, but little things production wise with vocals and other stuff that they added in that I go, oh, it's like the more that you listen to it, the more you do hear like, oh, they tried like some different shit. They just kind of, took some chances here and there. And some of it is stuff that you don't even catch the first time around. But it's a really strong album. And honestly, like it's an album that does start off really strong, but then you get to the middle of the album, and two of my favorite songs on the album, Secret Touch and Earthshine, are back to back kind of in the middle of the album. And I'm like, man, they had strong material like that far into the album. So obviously this is at 15 and I'm saying all these nice things about it. So there is still some of the middle of the road stuff. It's not really as much of a problem as other albums, but really when it comes to the production, I honestly don't really, I would do things to improve both of the versions. The remix version is missing something, and then there are problems with the original mix. So to me, it's kind of a thing where I go, I kind of don't know how I feel, because like, one does sound better, but there's still some sort of energy that it's taken out of it a little bit.
You just got to play both at the same time. Like both
maybe
mixes.
That's what I haven't thought about that. I'm gonna try that.
Crack the code.
I'm gonna take the album and put it in GarageBand and put them like right next to each other in either channel. So you're hearing I don't know. That would be a fucking mess. Anyway,
I don't know, man. I think we're onto something.
I think I think we should do that with all the Megadeth albums. We'll put like the shitty version in one channel. Anyway, but yeah, Vapor Trails is a really strong album to me, and has a lot of memorable moments. And it just, to me, I love it because it just sounds like a band that's reinvigorated, and they're just like, we still really want to do this, and it shows. So, but they did so many fucking badass albums that one has to go at number 15. And so now we can move on to our last two of this episode.
Now, I am seriously debating on the fly, do I swap my 14 and 13?
Well, you can, but you got to make that decision right now. Do it. Do you just go with your heart? How do you feel?
I'm going to do it.
Oh, okay. Man. Okay. So, all right.
That's so whatever. On the fly change. So my number 14.
What used to be your 13. You swapped them.
Yep. Gotcha. Because I listened to the other earlier today and had a sudden change of heart, but I forgot to change it on the list.
Okay.
So
14.
A reminder, this is me being completely fair to every part of their discography.
Okay.
My number 14 is Caress of Steel.
All right. Okay. That's it. That's
Now,
that. I think that's one that's lower on some people's list, so it kind of makes sense.
and I can kind of see why, because like there are fantastic moments on this, but there's also a consistency issue, and I'm gonna get into it.
Okay. Okay. So this is their
So
the first 70s album that we're talking about.
it is the first 70s album, the third album from the 70s, but it's the first one we're talking about on this list.
Yep.
Yeah, cool. Bastille Day, killer opener. Love how it rocks in the verses and really opens up in that chorus. Totally belongs on Greatest Hits. It's an amazing song.
Sure.
I think I'm going bold. I hope not. But the riff in it is really cool. But you know, it's kind of more of a, I don't want to call it a novelty song, but it's like, you know, it is a good fun. It would belong on their first album, I think.
I've heard that the title came about as kind of a joke. They're kind of making fun of Going Blind by Kiss.
Yeah.
Because they toured together quite a lot. And so
that's another band we've done a 3-parter on.
That was a fun one. If you want to have more fun, you know, the Kiss 3-parter is a lot of fun.
It is. Man, Lakeside Park is this nice vibey one. I love it. And then closing out this side,
you're already
like there's only like, you know, 3 individual just songs, and then the other 2 account for, what is it, like 32 minutes of the album's runtime.
yeah
Like it's a weirdly structured album when you think about it, because it's like Rush is the type of band that's like, yeah, we're gonna like release an EP's worth of songs, but like it's gonna be the same length as your average album. Like it's gonna have like 4 or 5 songs on it, but 2 of them are gonna amount to a half hour. You know,
it's a big reason why their label hated it, and could be why initially it didn't sell very well either. Yeah,
like the Necromancer, like 12 and a half minutes, and it's not even the longest track on the album. I love the very Spinal Tap voiceover. Like this is the sort of stuff Spinal Tap we're parodying. But like the real vibey beginning portion is gorgeous, and the riff at 6.5 minutes in is fucking righteous. Like they go full upbeat Sabbath following this before going into this kind of soothing rock, like soft rock section. Fantastic stuff. I think it's underrated.
Yeah,
but I think there's much stronger stuff from the 70s output. And Fountain of Lamnath, 20 minutes, baby. Like the thing I love about Rush is the marriage of beauty and badassery, you know? Like they'll lull you into relaxation only to pull you back in with a full-on mosh riff. Like, and I love the amount of reverb on the drums on this song, considering that this is a 70s record, you know, an era for notoriously dry drums. Like, and then holy shit, they bust out this clean passage at about like 5 minutes 20, and which would be right at home on like an 80s thrash album, you know, with like one of those like spooky clean passages. Like, especially when the lead guitar goes over the top of it as well. Like I've heard Testament do stuff like that a lot. You know, listen to the Testament ranking that we did not too long ago. But it goes real smooth, like eventually bringing the loudness back in, and then eventually we return to that riff from earlier and come full circle. Like this album, despite all of the praise I've just heaped onto it, barring the first 3 tracks, it is an absolute commitment of a record to stick on, which gives it a bit of a consistency issue. Like, I feel like, you know, obviously the way the album is sequenced is a product of its time. You know, the running order had to fit on sides of an LP.
Mhm.
Whereas like, CDs and onward, you can kind of get away with, unless you intended on doing like a double album sort of situation. But again, it's like to have 3 songs and then 2 epics on it is just kind of a okay, whoa, ooh, sort of thing, And I feel like I would have to be in the right mood to kind of commit myself to sit down to this album the way it's laid out. But again, that's just a little bit of a hang up for me personally. Like
Yeah.
if I had it on vinyl, it would probably be easier. But I very often find myself like going for the first 3 tracks and then thinking, I mean, if I listen to the Necromancer, I've also got to listen to Fountain of Lamneth.
Yeah.
And like they're awesome, but it's like a half hour, dude. I got stuff to do.
Yeah. And I mean, but yeah, and all that stuff. I think it's because like that album came out, and like the future of the band was very uncertain, because they even on the tour, they weren't doing very well on tour, and the label was ready to just fucking get rid of them because of that album. And I think it's one that for fans, it's become one that people really enjoy. I mean, honestly, like that's my favorite thing. I like a lot of the albums that are kind of oddities, like Running Order is weird, or there's some odd ideas on the album where it feels like it doesn't quite fit. It is kind of a leap. Obviously, if the album prior to that, if you take Fly By Night, you've got like Bytor and the Snow Dog, but that's kind of the only indication you got of where they would go with Caress of Steel, and they leaned fully into it on those tracks. So
it's good stuff. It's real good stuff, which lends it to being on the upper end of my bottom. But that sounded funny. But
ladies,
last minute place change. Can't remember the last time I did that.
Okay,
if ever.
Well, so I mean, I don't know where your next one's going to go, but I like the fact that now you've brought us into the 70s, because I'm going to keep us in the 70s. My number 14 is the debut self-titled Rush album from 1974.
Okay.
Fucking great album. Really strong debut album. Obviously, the only album with John Rutsey on drums, who already sounds great as a drummer. And so, if they had continued with him, I mean, it'd be like, okay, you got a great drummer, but they just, they really lucked out, and that sounds like a really mean thing to say, because, John, you ended up not in the band mostly because of health problems, and then they got Neil, but still, I feel like the story of Rush, it was like what do you call that? Is that serendipity? Is that the right usage of that word?
I don't know.
I'll look it up. Things happened in a very positive way. I don't know. It's I don't know a lot about words. So
serendipity definition.
He's using his future device to look
the
up.
Occurrence and development of events by chance in a happy or beneficial way. Yeah, that is exactly right.
Bam.
Back on the airplane mode.
See, I'm kind of smart. So anyway, this ends up going here, even though to me, I totally enjoy this album, but when it comes to Rush, this is still them trying to find their own style, which is, and it's interesting because like, if the history of Rush, like they had already been playing together for years, just doing smaller gigs and stuff like that. And so I really do think that the really the only problem with this album is the fact that it sounds at times a little bit too much like other classic rock of the time.
I can see that. Yeah.
And the easy thing to say is it sounds like Led Zeppelin, but it doesn't really. Like maybe some of Geddy's vocals sound a little bit Robert Planty at times, but I'm not a big Led Zeppelin fan, and I would put on this album before any Led Zeppelin album. So it's whatever. But and obviously you're missing Neil Peart's lyrics, but I feel like for these particular songs, they would have been unnecessary anyway. I feel like lyrically they kind of go together nicely. But it is like, energetic, good time rock and roll. Like it's, you know, and I would say that, just like I said I was talking about Snakes and Arrows, about how, even that's an album that isn't in my top. It's still better than most of their contemporaries at the time. I would go as far as to say in 1974, Rush's debut was better than most bands' debuts in around that time.
It's
very strong album.
It's a real strong way to just come right out of the gate.
Yeah.
And like, here's the thing as well, like there are, again, this could support the idea that the album is a bit quote unquote derivative of like other classic rock bands at the time. But the thing is, it went to show, like, I'll get to it in like a future episode. I won't tell you which one, but the like that debut Rush album is like, there's a song on there that sounds like a Black Sabbath song. There's a song on there that sounds like it's a Kiss song. You could say some of the album sounds like fucking Foghat, you could say, and all of these like all of these 70s rock tropes are there, but they're all done exceptionally well. Like,
agreed. Yeah.
They would be among like the hits of those bands if those songs were done by those bands.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're talking about a song like What You're Doing, I almost feel like it's an almost identical to a Black Sabbath riff.
Well,
I'm all like, that sounds like a Sabbath riff to me.
Yeah.
And not only that, like when you get to like, what I would call the centerpiece of the album, even though it's not in the center, Working Man. The way the midsection of that song plays out, it reminds me of like, Iron Man or War Pigs. It would speed up and there'd be a faster part. But not only that, like the importance of this album is it all lies on Working Man, because that was the reason that they broke. Like the album came out to very little fanfare. Some people liked it, didn't really get, much traction, but then, a radio station in Cleveland started playing Working Man. It became a hit. And then, so that was that, that song by itself is, I'm sure they would have continued doing stuff, but who knows how long it would have lasted if they had not really had any success. So Working Man was that, the catalyst, I guess, that led to, the long ass career of Rush. So it's a classic album. I love it, but it has to go lower, because if somebody came to me and said, what's a good Rush album for me to start with, I would never point them here.
That's the thing. It's not indicative of where they would end up. It's just a damn good 70s rock album,
Agreed. So that's why it's not really low, but it had to be in this first episode, because while it's a great album, I wouldn't call it a great Rush album. It's just kind of great for what it is. But yeah, so it ends up going here at number 14.
Cool. So my number 13 that I had to
used to be 14.
Around, that used to be 14. And this being this low will probably shock you, but I couldn't justify it knowing what was above it. So my number 13 is...
I'm nervous.
It's Hold Your Fire.
Oh, wow. Okay.
See, you would think, right? Me being the 80s guy, that this would be like super high, probably like maybe even like top 3, right? Here's the thing, though. Like, this album, the rest of their 80s albums have like different vibes they'll kind of pull from. Sure. Whereas Hold Your Fire is the one of, say, if you give their like kind of 80s synth albums a trilogy of like, you know, Grace Under Pressure, Power Windows, and Hold Your Fire, you know, to an extent singles, but Signals, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, I feel like Signals is a transition from their uh, early 80s stuff to what they would do. Like
Sure.
they're it's still rooted in a little bit of rock, but it's got a lot more heavy synth on it. Anyway, I'm talking about Hold Your Fire. This one feels like, you know, there are fantastic songs on this album, as there are on all Rush albums.
Mhm.
But this one has a vibe from start to end that it doesn't really deviate from an awful lot. Like,
Okay.
you
Yeah,
know,
I can see that.
it, whereas you've got some like real dramatic um left turns on Grace Under Pressure and Power Windows, you don't really get an awful lot of surprises on this album.
Uh-huh.
It's just a good selection of like 10 80s synth heavy AOR songs. I love that. But if I'm assessing it as a Rush album, like you say, would I point them to this album first? And again, it comes down to this one isn't indicative of their style as a whole enough for me to, you know, to be able to put it higher. So like Force 10 is this like further dive into more synth heavy album oriented rock.
Yeah.
Love this song. Time Stands Still, my god. Excellent 80s pop rock song. And some of the most like existential lyrics I've
Yeah.
heard in a long time, because it's like it's literally about like growing older and, you know, wanting to hold on to the moment, but
Well,
you can't freeze time. You need to be in
in the
the
moment.
moment because
It's yeah, and so Neil ends up writing again lyrics that, like, as I got older, it became so important to me, because it's like, you know, not looking back, stop to look around you, because that's become
yeah.
a thing that, especially once I got into my 30s and got a little older, I became really obsessed with, if I was in a situation where I was really enjoying myself, sometimes I literally will just stop and look at the room I'm in.
Yeah,
You know,
I've
like,
been
you
there.
know, mental pictures of like, right now I feel great. I'm going to take in every aspect of this moment right now, you know, and I'm just like, you know, yeah. And I feel like that's a lyric that, you know, I mean, you know, you clearly relate to it, but I think a lot of young people, the sentiment isn't quite as powerful
Hmm.
you know, as it is when you're a little bit older.
I think people nowadays, especially my generation, I think with the way, you know, things have accelerated in the last like 10, 20 years. I think people get nostalgic far quicker than they used to. Like
Yeah.
it used to be, I feel as though it used to be, this is like getting really deep now, but like
It's all
I
right.
feel as though it used to be you had to wait until you were way into adulthood to start missing being a kid. Whereas like I missed being a kid before I was 18, you know?
Yeah.
And I like I'm 23 now, you know, and I know that this song is going to be one of those that sticks with me, and it's only going to mean more and more getting older.
Yeah.
Like I've always been, you know, and this is not me tooting my own horn. I've always been kind of uh emotionally mature in the sense I'm very aware that I won't be around forever,
Sure.
and I want to enjoy as much as I can, you know. And I would say like I had a really good I had an excellent childhood. The teen years were pretty difficult. They can be for a lot of people, but
Sure.
like in a way, because I was such an outcast. I was bullied a lot in like high school and shit. Uh, like you wouldn't know it now. I mean, look at these. um, no, for me. I look back on childhood far more nostalgically than I do for my teen years. But I've started feeling things for, you know, my the latter half of my teen years when things were good, you know,
Yeah.
getting better than they were. And I'm starting to think, wow, I wish I had like kind of I wish I still had some of the optimism that 16-year-old me had, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there is like sort of this blissful ignorance when you're younger to certain things, and eventually, you become aware of things, and there comes a point in your life where it's kind of up to you to sort yourself out emotionally, find out who you are, what you can handle, what you want to do with your life. And
I want to
this
rock.
song,
So.
yeah.
Had to lighten the mood there real quick.
This is where like Twisted Sister just poof in behind me, you know.
But it's a good point, because like I've found though that I don't miss being a kid or being young at all. Like I don't, when it comes to that sort of thing, I've found that over the years, I don't miss that at all. I would never want to go back to even being in my 20s. But the thing that I do miss is the feelings of particular things. So that's why, like, especially on my channel, I talk so much about music from when I was younger, because those are the things that gave me the feelings. And so I experienced those feelings through the music. And so that's why, the stopping to look around thing is a lot more important, because it's like, the feeling of it all, I don't really care when it happens, because I know that like the feelings that I had that affect me now that I had when I was 13 or whatever, somebody else who's just now 13 is experiencing those in some other way. It has nothing to do with the time period. It has to do with the actual feelings. And so those have become a lot more important to me. And that's, and so much of that is tied into music, somewhat into movies. But it's just that thing, I guess that's we're kind of lucky in that respect, because I think, years and years and years and years ago, that, maybe what is it? Was it a book that you read? Do you even have that book? Can you even find that book anymore? If you're in the 1800s, it's like, remember back in the day when somebody told a story, but we're lucky enough to be able to take those things and still experiencing them now, with music and other things like that. That's why, like, I never, as much as people like to talk shit about the negatives of the internet and modern technology, I also look at it as well, in the future, like, I mean, some of these things are, not just now, but in the future, it's actually making a lot of people's lives probably better in certain ways, because of, being able to experience these positive feelings, because those kind of things can help you get through tough times that are happening now. And so, sorry, we got pretty deep there, but a song like Time Stand Still brings that out. It brings those emotions out.
I think it's good to have a wholesome edge to our podcast every now and again.
Isn't it great that we're all better people?
Fishy!
Anyway, that was our after school special moment where we get really heartfelt, but I'm sure that won't be the last time it happens.
I'm just gonna state here, just before we move on, how fucking epic would it have been if, like, during the part in Ferris Bueller where he says, time moves fast. If you don't, life moves real fast.
Yeah.
If you don't look around and enjoy it, sometimes you could miss it. How epic would it be if Time Stand Still was out just before the movie, so Time Stand Still could have played there?
Oh.
Just saying. That would have been like,
I wonder if Hughes would have been down for that. Yeah, that's I feel like you could do that. Somebody should put together like a TikTok video of that, where you have the quote and then you have Time.
I bet it's been done like
Probably.
12 years ago on YouTube.
Yeah, most likely.
But yeah, like, oh man, Open Secrets is this big, airy, vibey, synth-driven AOR.
Yeah,
love the atmosphere of the middle section. Second Nature, like, this album is very power ballady.
That's another one.
Yeah, like, even in its most rocking moments, this album has this like power ballad edge to it that, like, it makes it a very heartfelt album, I think. Prime Mover is like upbeat major key stuff. Love that. Lock and Key. Oh man, and I mean this in a good way, because I fucking love them. Lock and Key gave me a kind of 80s Toto vibe, and Like, if you're gonna get that from an album, you're gonna get it from this one.
Yeah.
But God, Mission is another one where it's like Mission is pretty much a montage song. It's awesome. Turn the Page. I like how the guitars and synths entwine on the 80s Rush stuff. Taishan, Eastern feel to this one, really cool. And High Water, groovy closing track. It's very 80s, right? But it's not as memorable from a song perspective as some of the other 80s albums.
Sure.
And so that's why I tragically had to dock this album a few spaces, because were it to be more memorable, it would probably be in my top like 6. Yeah.
Well, you know what, sir? You are not alone. My number 13 is also Hold Your Fire from 1987.
2 matchups.
Yeah, 2 matchups in this episode. Yeah, this was one that this is actually the one that I struggled with actually putting it lower or higher in the list. But once I figured out, it's probably got to go here, I was like, well, it's got to wrap up. It's got to be number 1 of the lower third. So I remember hearing somebody say that it was the ultimate 80s Rush album, and I'm like, I beg to differ on that one. I will get to the one that I think really sounds 80s, but this one definitely does have its moments for sure. I don't really have a whole lot more I can add aside from what you said about it. I feel like this is one that's underrated and sometimes gets thrown to the very end of people's lists, and I think that's unfortunate because it has a really strong energy to it.
I think that's because 70s snobs have an aversion to reverb being used on anything. Like,
maybe, I don't know. It doesn't. It's definitely not.
Room sound is not the real sound of the instrument. It has to be dry as fuck for it to be real music.
Yeah. I love the way this album sounds. I do think that maybe initially, I think the first time I heard this album all the way through, it didn't really connect with me because I don't think at first listen there's a whole lot to sink your teeth into. Like you're saying, it's a little bit, the vibe is just kind of throughout the album, but
yeah,
it's got so many great songs on it, and it's definitely a grower. Like it is one that over the years is I put it on a lot and I just enjoy it. It doesn't, it doesn't have the variety of other Rush albums, but with songs like Time Stands Still and Second Nature, these amazingly well-written songs. Plus, it just sounds good to me. I don't know what it is about this because it has a real sort of warm and meaningful vibe going on all the way through it. And I've always really liked that. But in the end, at this point, we're putting these albums up with, absolute fucking classic albums that some of which, once we get into the next episode, you're going to have, me talking about albums that are pretty much perfect. I can't say one bad thing about them, but yet you still have to put them in some kind of order. And that's, but Hold Your Fire is great. And it definitely is one that I think deserves a lot more respect than it gets, because it's got so much great shit on it. But yeah, that wraps up our bottom third of the Rush discography. And I feel like
Daniel.
I feel like it's weird how focused we've been. There's been very little actual tangents that like took us away from Rush. They were all very related to Rush.
This here, like the only tangents we've been on have been like deep philosophical, like like normally we talk about like stupid haha poopy funny shit. Like today we're like, what is the meaning of life? Maybe we need a palate cleanser. We need to wrap it up by saying titties and dicks and balls. All right,
titties,
everybody. Dicks and balls. That's the cranked and wanked version of peanut butter platypus.
Cranked and wanked. But yeah, so that's part one of the Rush trilogy. Oh, I like that.
Yes.
I don't know why I wasn't calling that in the beginning. Yeah, it's if some of you are annoyed at the fact that it's just been a utter love fest, then don't bother to watch or listen to the other two parts because it's not going to get any better. But at least now I feel good that we've gotten into this, and there's a whole lot of albums that, you know, we maybe weren't doubled up on it with the number, but we both talked about a lot of things and got them out of the way in this one. So we got some fucking ground to cover, really.
Yeah.
So yeah,
looking at the albums we haven't talked about, like, holy shit.
Yeah. So as usual, peanut butter platypus to you guys. I'm holding up my mug that says peanut butter platypus because you should go buy a mug or a hat or a shirt or something. Throw us some bones, roll the bones our way.
Hey.
But yeah, thanks for joining us for part one of Rush. You know, I'm sure a lot of you will be here ready for part two and part three. And, you know, those of you out there that stick with us, no matter what, you guys are the reason we do this and make it fun. But in this particular case, it's also doesn't hurt that we're getting to talk about Rush. So yeah, that's it for this episode of Cranked and Ranked. Thank you very much for joining us. We will see you next time for part two of Rush. And as usual, I'm just going to wrap it up real quick. I'm real curious to see what the voice is going to be this time, but let's find out. I'm going to do a build up. We're building up to it. And then we're going to find out. You better not let us down, Eddie Sparxx. I'm throwing it over to Eddie Sparxx to take us out.
Later, dude, away from here. Try my life again. Later, dude,
Wow. You can hit some fucking notes, dude.
Oh! Holy shit, man. That feeling when you hit a note and you surprise yourself. It's like a Mariah Carey fucking whistle note.
Woo!
Holy shit, man.
Oh, you're welcome, everyone.